Doctors of Reddit, what are some of your anti-vax parent stories? I had a kid come in that was super sick, 3 years old and in septic shock. He had the flu and another compounded viral infection, or maybe pertussis. Heart rate was close to 200, respiratory rate in the 50s, blood pressure in the 70s. Kid was so freaking dry that we could barely get IVs into him and I almost had to drill an IO. We dumped a ton of fluids into him, started him on vasopressors and transferred him to the local children's hospital. I had asked the mom if he was vaccinated and she said no. Vaccines have really bad side effects. They'll make you sick. I explained to her that not getting the vaccines had made her kid 10 times sicker than he ever would have been from any mild vaccine reaction. She told me I was a freaking moron and that I obviously have no clue what I'm talking and that's the reason her kid was getting transferred. She also told me that recommending she vaccinate her kids was racist. For anyone not familiar with the jargon, an IO is an intraosseous line. That means the thing goes inside your bone to deliver fluids. When I was a medical student, I had a 5-year-old patient who looked and acted like a 2-year-old. Failure to thrive. His mother was super weird. She shaved the sides of his head, somehow like a marine cut, but kept his back hair long. She refused to vaccinate him or even feed him certain foods. Her sister and her husband were trying to get custody of the child because his mother was weird and didn't take care of him properly. I suspect she was paranoid. She would literally fight and call you names if you attempt to suggest to put the kid on a proper hospital diet. She wanted to inspect the food first and make sure he eats only certain things. Long story short, the attending calling county and they took the child away from her. Good. Holy crap, that neglectfulness and frankly abuse would have severely impacted that child later on. As a medical student, I went to see a young child, 1 year, in the outpatient clinic before the attending. The child was due for vaccines, and I talked to the parents about getting them on that day. The parents said they had reservations about them, so I talked to them about their reservations. We talked about all of the things they had read on the internet, and walked through each point one by one. One of the benefits of being the medical student is that you have nothing but time. I explained how vaccines are made and how they work. They don't have the mercury preservative they once did. Some vaccines are live but attenuated and others are immunogenic sequences bound to a protein. And why we get so many so early. That's when you're most likely to be affected by these diseases. They were concerned about the effects of so many vaccines at once. This is a common concern, but we challenge your system less with a vaccine than you see walking around in the world every day, and about them making the child sick. Not possible with anything but a live vaccine, and that's why those are attenuated. They are such a small dose that a non-immunocompromised individual should have no problem with them, even though you might feel a little sick because we activate your immune system and that's how you feel when that happens. The whole discussion took probably half an hour, and then they decided to go forward with the vaccines. As it turns out, most people are just scared. And who can blame them? With all of the misinformation in the world, it's easy to see how parents get to that point. But they also are human. And when you sit and talk to them like the people that they are, intelligent and able to understand your points, they respond in a positive way. It's one of the moments in medical school that I reflect on frequently, especially when things are tough and I feel like being impatient with people. This is a great story. As a nurse, I see quite a few patients who are misinformed or simply haven't been educated on certain things. I was a medical student when this happened. My attending pediatrician gave me a heads up about the parent I was about to see and decided it would be best if he came into the room with me. 4-year-old kid came in with a horrible cough and difficulty breathing. It was almost sure as heck pertussis, aka whooping cough. The kid was coughing so bad he vomited on the exam table. He went on to ask about vaccinating her kid and of course she replied no, even though her son was dang near coughing up his lung right next to her. I think my attending had seen enough and had enough of her not vaccinating her kid and had the following conversation with the kid's mom. Attending: Mrs. I have to ask you, do you trust me as your son's doctor? Mom: of course I do, doctor. Attending: well, there's 2 problems here that we need to address. 1. You either think you are more knowledgeable than me when it comes to medicine, and if that's the case I should no longer be your son's doctor, or you don't trust me as a physician and in that case I shouldn't be your son's doctor. Mom: blank stare on face. Attending: Will you please reconsider giving your son a vaccine? Mom, no. My attending obviously treated her kid, but after this whole ordeal resolved he fired her and her son as a patient and referred them to another pediatrician. He had enough of her crap. I respected the heck out of him after he pulled this move. We had a 14-year-old female come in for abdominal pain one time. She weighed 80 pounds, looked sickly. Her mother refused to let her eat anything but a handful of things, nothing with very much protein at all. She literally had a binder full of articles about how horrible vaccines are, all the bad things they put in food these days, etc. She had completely brainwashed this kid so the kid believed it too. Her labs showed malnutrition. Her teeth were horrible. Just a sad case all around. Curious if the mother was on the same diet. Bet not. When I was a med student, I had a parent who wanted to do a delayed vaccination schedule. Basically it means that you get all the same vaccinations but you pointlessly and foolishly do it over a longer time period. The mom had read a book promoting this practice that was unfortunately written by an MD. My pediatric attending had zero chill. Is that the book written by Dr. ? Yes, well, then you should know that I was in the same medical school class as Doctor but I got much better scores than he did. Dang, that's freaking savage. I would have loved to see it. Nearly qualified pharmacist here, so obligatory not a doctor. Our pharmacy offers travel vaccines for people going away to countries with a high likelihood of severe tropical disease. Star parenting goes to the parents who got themselves vaccinated for rabies, but not their two primary school age, elementary, for non-Brits, children. Med school student here. I was getting my hair cut and I was talking to the barber about how more people should get the new meningitis B vaccine since I know a person who got meningitis B and almost died. The desk lady went off about how vaccines are dangerous, and pretty much every single anti-vax talking point. I explained the actual facts behind vaccines and said that I'm studying medicine. I think I might know what I'm talking about, and then she went off about professors not knowing what they are talking about and that they just teach what they are told to teach so that we can all be brainwashed into supporting the big pharmaceutical companies and that my proof were all fabricated by them. In medical school I saw a kiddo whose parents refused vaccines, and so when they were given the vaccine refusal form to sign, this form essentially said that the parents understood that refusing vaccines was against medical advice, that their kiddo could get sick from all those preventable diseases, and that they wouldn't hold the doctor practice liable for any complications that the kiddo may get from said preventable diseases. This mom pulled out a Sharpie and blacked out the part about the doctor not being held liable. The parents thought that we'd be cool with them just changing that form just for them, and they wanted the doctor to be held liable for their moronic choice. Of course this didn't work and they were told to sign the form or they would be discharged from the practice and have to find another. They refused to sign and were told to leave after given a list of other pediatricians in the area. Not a doctor, but a nurse and a vaccine advocate, once had a public argument with a friend from long ago. He argued that by not vaccinating his kids and risking terrible side effects and possible autism, he was placing no one else at risk, however acknowledged the potential risk to his kids. After attempting to explain the potential risk to others and him failing to understand, I created an analogy which I still use to this day. Imagine if my kids and your kids get into the same car. Both of your kids don't put on seatbelts. Therefore, if there is an accident, there is an increased risk that your kids will die and also harm my children in the process. This seemed to click with him and he doesn't share his anti-vax propaganda on social media anymore. Good analogy. It's like not wearing your seatbelt because you're worried you could get trapped in your car after an accident. It's astronomically more likely you will be killed in an accident. But hey, at least you have avoided the minuscule risk of being trapped in a burning car by your seatbelt. I feel like Family Guy said it best. There's an episode where Lois and Peter kidnap this child to get him to a hospital because the parents believe prayer will heal their kid. So Lois eventually has to confront them and says something like, maybe the vaccines and medicines are God's answer to your prayers. So why keep praying if you're going to wipe your ass, with his reply. Not directly related to my being a doctor, but a mutual friend of mine and my wife's is a chiropractor and anti-vaxxer, refused to vaccinate her first two kids. I didn't want her or her kids coming anywhere near our place when we had newborns or kids. 2. Because of the risk her unvaccinated kids placed on my partially vaccinated babies. She got all offended saying the usual rubbish like if vaccines work, what do your kids have to fear and your kids are more risk to mine because they'll be shedding viruses. Her third child was born with cystic fibrosis, which makes them very susceptible to all forms of respiratory and airborne infectious diseases. Suddenly the whole hypocritical family is vaccinated against everything. Well, at least they were able to change to protect their vulnerable child. It could be worse, they could have dug in and endangered their youngest. Had a kid come in for generic upper respiratory virus. Asked mom if he was vaccinated, as is routine. She said no. When I asked why not, her response was, well, my boyfriend was vaccinated and he's still got meningitis, so they don't even work. I told her that's the same as saying your friend got bruised by a seatbelt in a car accident, so you don't wear them when you drive. Pediatric resident here in the US. Our continuity clinic accepts everyone, including those kicked out of previous practices for anti-vaccination beliefs, which is a bit frustrating at times. Really, it's a mixed bag for how we can handle these patients. Ostracizing the parents is only going to build further barriers between provider and kid, so that doesn't help. Frankly, what has worked best in my experience is to try to understand where the families are coming from, explicitly asking what their thoughts are on vaccines to let them voice their misunderstandings. Oftentimes, this is the first time they've been allowed to talk about their questions and concerns regarding vaccines with a trained MD that doesn't just belittle them. Most frustratingly, it takes patience and time, assessing where they are regarding change, pre-contemplation, contemplation, etc., helps determine where we are for vaccinating them today, in a month, or in a few months. One thing that I do draw the line on is to make sure that we see these kids more frequently than normal children, as they are at higher risks for illnesses because they are not vaccinated. No room for negotiation on that point. This helps twofold. First, it helps build rapport with the family, but also secondly, if they decide to take a delayed schedule, which is still not ideal, but better than no vaccines, we can eventually catch them up to speed with their vaccinations by frequent return visits. Interestingly, it's always the yoga pants Karen types that are the anti-vaxxer, or pro-measles as I've been calling them lately, rather than the less educated single moms on welfare or the recent immigrants that speak no English. Ultimately, we're the kids' docs and their advocates, and are most effective when we ally with the families, or better put, get the families to ally with us, and do have to be stern after a certain point. It's a mix of being stern, but also compromising to work with families to provide their kids as much and the best, data-supported, care as possible. Not a doctor but significant other, works with children that have autism. She has one parent that consistently tells her she regrets vaccinating her kid. She then asks questions to MISO about which vaccines are the ones that cause autism as if it's a big secret. MISO tells her that autism is predetermined before birth and signs just aren't noticeable until around 2 years of age. She still tries to justify her logic with other anti-vax parents' stories from FB. MISO has 2 master's degrees towards this field. It blows my mind how they can still argue with overwhelming facts. 4th year med student reporting in. Had a rotation with a pediatrician where we ended up in the classic encounter with an anti-vaccination parent. This lady was a conspiracy theory magnet. She casually mentioned everything from 9/11 to chemtrails. Of course she loved the idea of the vaccine conspiracy as well, opting to not protect her 1-year-old to stick it to Big Pharma. I relayed all of this to my attending after my exam. I would see the patient first, gather history and do my exam to present to my attending physician. He got this sort of lazy smirk on his face that screamed, "Watch this." We go back into the exam room and we cover all of the important bits of a well-child encounter. Growth charts, behavioral milestones, nutrition, sleep, and then we get to vaccines. She lists approximately 15 reasons why vaccines are more dangerous than the disease they protect against. Lol. In addition to the various evils of the pharmaceutical industry, my attending listens quietly until she's done with her soapbox, about one eternity later, and then interjects with, "Have you considered the possibility that anti-vaccine propaganda could be an attempt by the Russians or the Chinese to weaken the health of the United States population?" In a moment of catastrophic cognitive dissonance, I swear I heard a strange popping noise as her brain misfired. It actually broke her. The allure of the increasingly ridiculous conspiracy theory was just too strong. She ended up agreeing to a modified vaccine schedule. I was flabbergasted. My attending just grinned at me in response. To this day I'm not sure the medical ethics of the situation are totally palatable, but goddamn the result was amazing. You have been visited by dat boy. Like this video in 7.6 seconds or he won't visit again until the 22nd of July, 2085. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video, or don't. Either way, have a great day you magnificent people.